Hello, and you are back in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool. This is our 49th episode, and today we'll be discussing all the conspiracies surrounding the music industry, the federal government using the border to fund more forever wars, and engaging in political persecution. So we're going to hop right into this with the music industry. The mainstream music industry is hot garbage for the most part, but there are some interesting things to talk about in the headlines, and this is, being Taylor Swift and Miley Cyrus. So first thing, what this impetus for this was that I saw Miley Cyrus at the Grammys, and she was with, some bodyguards, very standard stuff, and there was, zoom-ins of the pictures and saying the guy's arm was, fake holding an umbrella, and he was actually holding a gun under his, coat jacket, something like that. So basically, that's one thing. So a lot of stuff coming out with Miley Cyrus at the Grammys that it meant more than it actually did, all these sorts of things. And, you've got Taylor Swift with, all this AI porn being made of her. That was a whole thing that went on, and this whole thing of it being a psyop and her being a psyop in general. And I view Taylor Swift as a completely manufactured persona, as someone who just exists to placate the masses into a nice lull so the handlers and owners of this country can keep getting away with what they're getting away with. And Taylor Swift is part of that. And all these record labels are part of that. As I think it was like Ice Cube or Ice-T, I think it was Ice Cube who said that all the owners of the record labels in private prisons are prisons owned by the same people. So the record labels have helped engineer this culture that pipelines young people into prison with the sort of music that gets produced. And it's not necessarily the record label saying, writing the lyrics and doing these sorts of things. It's just the way they operate and what they give play to leads to a certain narrative that gets pushed. And that's the end result of a lot of stuff, is that the legacy institutions have this narrative that they want to push onto the people, and they'll only give the people who either are extremely invested into it or are willing to grit their teeth and toe the line. And those are the people who get anywhere in these legacy institutions that have a lot of control over the culture, but that's been waning with the internet and the parallel economy coming about. So all this will become less and less relevant, but it certainly is still very relevant, which is why people make conspiracy theories and people have all these things that they're thinking about. And with all this information, and we are in the information age, that is out there, it's easier to make conspiracy theories about these sorts of things. So of course, someone like Miley Cyrus goes to the Grammys, there's, hours worth of footage maybe that you can dissect, hundreds of pictures that you can dissect, where that wasn't nearly the case decades ago. Now, of course, there's always been conspiracy theories about musicians and famous people. There's the conspiracy theory about Paul McCartney having died in 1966, and I say it's a conspiracy theory when it actually isn't, because he actually did die in 1966, died in a car crash, replaced by William Shepard, born 1937. The evidence is out there, and if you don't see it, then you're just blind, right? But that was something that happened in the 60s. It was like, at 69 is when it really peaked, with the cover of Abbey Road being a funeral procession, supposedly. I don't want to get too deep into that, but the point I'm making is that people have always wanted to make conspiracy theories and look into the deeper meaning of things and try and figure out all these sorts of things, for basically forever. It's just that's been accelerated, taken to the next level with the internet age, where people are constantly overstimulated, looking for more stimulation, and just immersed in way too much information. And all that is a perfect recipe for all these conspiracy theories. And then add on top of that all the psyops and mind games that the state is playing, whether that just be the U.S. government doing it to its own population, other governments doing it to other populations, and you've got like the UN and the WEF doing these sorts of things, and then all the corporations that not only collude with the state but have their own agendas too that they're pushing on to people, where that's all that legitimately happening, and people feel those effects. And then it's like, well, what else is out there? And it leads to that sort of thing. And this is why you see people say, like, well, the bodyguard of Miley Cyrus was getting ready for something. Or, Taylor Swift is all a psyop. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. Like I said, I think Taylor Swift is a manufactured persona. Not in the sense that, like, she doesn't genuinely like doing her music or thinks that she's a good musician or whatever, but the idea of being a Swiftie or caring about her relationships or all these sorts of things is just meant to have you invested in that and placated by that, rather than looking around you and be concerned at what they're doing to you that's destroying the American economy and way of life. So I think I've gabbed on enough about that first topic, and we're going to move into the next topic. It's going to be a bit of a double entendre, because we're going to talk about the federal government. And if you stuck around with me for this long, I appreciate you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. But we're going to get into this article from Newsweek that's in the description if you want to follow along with me. The headline is Senate Border Security Bill Text Explained, 5 key takeaways. And the 5 key takeaways are tougher migration rules, so saying that ICE's detention capacity is increased, a boost to border patrol, aid for Ukraine and Israel, $14 billion to Israel, $60 billion to Ukraine, 4.83 to Indo-Pacific nations, which is India, I think Indonesia, those sorts of places, Indo-Pacific, whatever. More, countries that aren't America getting our money, basically. And $10 billion in humanitarian aid to citizens in Gaza, the West Bank, and Ukraine that totally isn't going to be ending up in the hands of the rich and elite there. It'll totally go to the people who actually need it. Sure. And then, of course, there's opposition to the bill. There are some people in Congress that have a couple of vertebrae worth of a backbone are saying this is bad. And of course, there are people who have absolutely no backbone and are supporting this. So that's the basically key takeaway of this. And this is the issue that inherently exists with these big omnibus bills. And this is basically the only way anything can happen as Congress, is if they compile a whole bunch of crap and then pass it through. And then, of course, they'll use a leading topic like the border to say, like, hey, this bill is going to be passed and it means that the border is going to be fixed. And then they sneak in funding for Ukraine, funding for Israel, funding for a whole bunch of other nonsense that you wouldn't have supported otherwise if it was like that. And saying that, Congress passes and voted for that, they can say, well, Congressman X or Senator Y or whoever voted on the bill to, fix the border, and it's fixed the border. So you can have this whole spin. So this is really just using the border crisis to push the uniparty's agenda, which is, of course, funding the forever wars and giving kickbacks to the people who toe the line of the uniparty's agenda and all these sorts of things, because, these bills go between the Senate and the House so many times, and all these things get added in between the process that people don't know about. And it's literally stacks and stacks high worth of paper just to read the bill, thousands and thousands of words, all the things they sneak into there, these big omnibus bills that people don't even know about, and they have like one thing to lead with. It's like, this is about the border, or this is about protecting America after 9/11. That's how they got the Patriot Act in place. This is how all the COVID stuff, the CARES Act, right? Saying, we just want to help people deal with the fact that we forced them out of work, all these sorts of things. So this is basically just the federal government using the border crisis that it created to justify pushing the uniparty's agenda, which is giving Ukraine and Israel more money so they can engage in the forever wars and a whole bunch of other, countries as well, so we can keep empire building on a global scale, because that's what the federal government does in this day and age, is empire building. If you aren't turned on to that, this is your announcement that this is the intention. And then, of course, there's probably a whole bunch of other stuff, giving kickbacks to politicians, giving the NIH and the, DHS and HHS a bunch of money to do God knows what. So I imagine there's a whole bunch of stuff like that that's buried in the fine line of the bill in 3-point font or whatever. That'll get passed anyway, and people will be none the wiser, and will be marketed towards the average person as as, hey, this is a bill that's going to fix the border, and it's not. They're going to do whatever they can to get control of the water back from Texas, if that happens, and then just keep it open. That's really what they want. Or they might close it just a little bit, just enough so it seems like they're doing something. But in reality, or the meaningful reality, is that they won't be doing basically anything. And people will still be able to get around it. It'll be basically just as porous as it was before. But there is that side of it. And the other thing with the federal government doing is political persecution, political prisoners. You have the January 6th incident, and however you feel about it, whether it was the worst insurrection in American history, or you think it was just a psyop pushed onto the people, I don't care. The federal government, this federal government, the Biden administration, his Department of Justice is using that event to justify having political prisoners, to justify political persecution of anyone who goes against them. They're using like all these like financial laws passed, I guess, to stop like Enron from committing money laundering, all this sorts of things, really perverting these sorts of things, just to throw the book or whatever version of the book as many people as they can that they think will convince people to vote for Trump, or have people to not vote for Biden. That's the meaningful thing there. So that's really what I want to drive in, is that the state has an absolute monopoly on force, use of violence, ultimate decision making, and the ability to mediate who violates the NAP. As in saying, if you commit some sort of act of aggression, whether that's like actual violence or committing or defrauding someone or doing these sorts of things, then the state has to be the mediator in that situation. And the state is using that power that it has. I think it's unjustified. You can think it's justified, but it's using that power that it has against people who do not deserve it at all, because they want to have these people taken out of the equation around election time. I've talked about all the censorship that's going to be going on this year because of the election, and this is doubly true in terms of political persecution, is that the Biden administration is going to do whatever they can to make sure the Democrats have as little people as possible saying that their shit stinks. Right, and it's, saying if we can get people implicated somehow in January 6th, then we're going to do that. And we're going to have them in prison. We're going to throw civil charges against them. Whatever it is that they can do, they are going to do it, because the state is only interested in maintaining and expanding its own power. That's what any state really does. Once you empower it with this with monopoly, forced violence, ultimate decision making. As I said, it only wants to maintain the monopoly it has over its current territory and expand that, and also expand the powers that it has over its population, and also make sure that the population is satisfied, i.e., or placated with being controlled by the state. And this is very much so why January 6th gets as much play as it does in the legacy media, why they talk about it constantly, why they use the sort of language that they do about it, is because they want to say that everything they do to the people who were either directly involved with J6 or they can paint as being involved with J6 or people think, oh, it's justified that they're throwing the book at them because they're criminals. They did something wrong. So this has to happen, right? When it's really just saying, hey, we've got people who know they don't like us, know are against us, know that if they go against us, it's going to be effective. And I'm not talking about them being violent or doing any sorts of things, saying just people who would make content, people who would be able to use grassroots movements, people who would be able to operate in a way where it would be very politically disadvantageous to the Uniparty. And the Uniparty knows that, it's using January 6th to maintain the Uniparty's power and to expand it. So that's the basic gist of that there. That's what I want you to keep in mind with anything the federal government does about anything, especially when they talk about January 6th, especially when the media talks about January 6th. Why they use this very negative language around January 6th and the people who involved with it, and insist it was an insurrection, and insist it was this awful thing that happened, when you've had similar things that have happened on Capitol Hill that did not nearly get this amount of scrutiny and play from the legacy media in the negative light. It's because the people who they can paint as having committed it are political enemies of the current administration, and by extension, the Uniparty. So I'm going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll be back Thursday with the 50th episode of this podcast. Very wonderful. Also did a guest episode with Lee's Alternate Reality. Her name's Lisa. That's the previous episode to this one. It's in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool featuring Lee's Alternate Reality. It was a great hour-long conversation. Highly recommended it. Had a blast filming it. She did as well, which I'm very thankful for. But I think I've gabbed and talked your ear off enough. We're going into the outro now. Thank you for being in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe whether you're listening on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, or Substack. And be sure to subscribe to my Substack, velvetroompublishing.substack.com, to keep up with Machine to Man and all my other projects.